From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. Not everyone is made for politics, and that includes a fair number of people who have won elections for a public office. Why a candidate is seeking your support is probably a good way to tell the good ones from the bad. You don't have to agree with their campaign platform to be able to trust them. You don't even have to share their religion or philosophy. But any decent politician should have a good reason for running in the first place. And the less selfish, the better. Which brings us to this episode's guest. You may or may not share Libby Morris's concerns about the threats posed to Polk County by the nuclear power industry and the government that oversees it. But you have to have at least some grudging respect for someone who has identified a potential problem, spent countless hours researching the history and implications of that problem, and decided that they needed to give up some of what would have been their retirement years to get into public office to do something about that problem. And a host of related issues that we all agree need addressing. We met at the Saluda Library earlier this month to talk about why she wants to be a Polk County Commissioner. Libby Morris, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you, James. I'm pleased to be here.
I think a lot of listeners are going to need you to introduce yourself. So tell me about your backstory and leading up to how you got interested in running for politics.
Golly, that's a big question. Well, I've lived in Polk County for almost 20 years. I'm a professional engineer. I escaped Greenville, the corporate world of Greenville, to move to Polk County. This was my retirement plan. Before that, my dad was a military man, and so we moved every couple of years. So I can claim lots of places having grown up. When people say, well, where did you grow up? And I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. When I came to Polk, I came for the rural environment. I came for the lifestyle. I bought a little farm. I raised registered Angora goats. That's where mohair comes from. I'm a hand spinner, and if you're a hand spinner, you're really snotty about what sorts of wool you want to spin. And mohair is just the most wonderful of all of them. I had a really great time with my goats. I took all manner of ribbons and all manner of shows. My favorite goats were Susie Q and Tinkerbell and Betty Sue. I had one buck who was just magnificent. I named all my bucks with what I thought were romantic names. And my best buck was Chico. And I knew he was going to be a big buck, a good big buck, because when he was 3 months old, he was already chasing the does. And I had to separate him. That's pretty young to separate out a goat. And that was really great. I had a really good time with that part of my life. I retired when I worked. The last 10 years of my career, I got on a plane on Monday morning and got off on Friday night and went all manner of places. I worked on very large projects for very large engineering companies. I only had 2 employers, world-class employers, and it was fun. And then when I retired at the end of 2015, I looked around and I decided, well, it's community service. So I got myself appointed to the planning board for Polk County. I made my way to Thermal Belt, where I'm on the board of directors. I'm on the board of adjustment for Polk County. My husband and I are wannabe ballroom dancers. I belong to a radio club. I'm KO4 NKC, and I'm a lifelong Girl Scout. And so community service is something that I've always done. And so when retirement came and I started to find my way in my community, that was sort of the path that I took. So, retirement was great. I had such a good time. I had a great time being a farmer. I had a great time on these committees. I had a great time learning about Polk County. I had a great time making a contribution. And then last October, I saw an ad in the bulletin that said that the Pacific Northwest Research Institute was conducting a study on behalf of the Department of Energy about trying to define a fair siting process for citing nuclear waste disposal facilities, and they were interested in talking to folks in Polk County. And I was shocked. And as an engineer, I thought, "Whoa, this is pretty heavy duty. What are they interested in?" The Department of Energy is not interested in my opinion. The Department of Energy would not want my opinion unless it had something to do with their plans. So I thought about this for a little while, and I thought about it a little bit more, and I couldn't sleep. And so I signed up for the interview. And the interview lasted an hour, and it was a professional interview where they asked the same question many different ways to find my true intent. And they asked if it was a Zoom interview. I was paid $50 on Amazon gift card, which I cashed immediately. And the interviewer was extremely professional. And when they were finished, what they wanted to know of me was, who makes decisions in Polk County, was their first question. And I said, well, the Board of Commissioners, I believe. And then they said, oh, okay, well, that's nice. Well, where are the decisions made? And I had to ponder that a bit. And but I believe that the decisions in our county are made in the churches. And we explored that a little bit. Okay, they're made in the churches. And then one of the things that I had to do in order to be accepted into the interview process was I had to answer a questionnaire which defined whether or not I was a landowner, and I am a landowner. And so they wanted to know, how would I feel if a nuclear waste disposal facility was located close to where I live? And I wouldn't be at all pleased. And for several reasons. And so then they said, well, okay, thank you so much. What would you like to know from us? And so my first question was, well, how many counties across the United States are you serving? And they said 80. I said, oh, okay, well, how many counties in North Carolina are you serving? They said 8. I said, okay. Well, how many folks in Polk County have you spoken to? And they said, well, you're it. Well, I said, well, how many folks are you going to talk to in Polk County? And they said, no one else has as yet signed up for the interview.
Okay, I'm just going to stop for a second because it's kind of interesting. There is a general criticism of surveys that are self-selected when people choose to participate or not on their own volition. And so I would say it's not going to be a representative sample of people's opinions if it's just folks who take it into their own head that they're going to respond.
You probably have a good point there. So what I'm telling you, what caused me to decide to run for office, because I'm not a politician. I've never been a politician. I'm a professional engineer. We keep our heads down. We're quiet. We tend to the details. We don't go out looking to be in the public eye. We're pretty much quiet people. So it had to be a significant emotional event to get me to step out of retirement. I'm doing little community service things here. I'm having a great time. Life is good. And, what was it that compelled me to go into this entire place, politics, about which I know nothing.
But you have been on the planning board and the Board of Adjustment. So you've been part of the policy-making process.
Yes, I have. Yes.
And for many people, it's a logical next step to go into making decisions rather than just making recommendations.
Well, probably it is a logical next step, especially for people who have their eyes set on that. But I never did. It never dawned on me that I would want to participate in a race where I would have to run and be voted on. It just never dawned on me. I was not in it for the politics. I was in it just as a community member to provide a little community service and do the right thing. The part about give back. You've had a great life, give back something. So I didn't think about that. And yes, probably it is the wrong way to select a group. But anyway, here I am. I have this interview. I'm the only voice. And I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. I called everybody I knew. And I said, hey, I just did this interview. You've got to do this interview. You've got to speak up. You've got to go tell them what you think. And a lot of people, I don't really want to get involved. Or how do you know you're talking to the right? How do you know it's not the Chinese? There are lots and lots of reasons why they don't. So I thought about it some more. And I went and I talked to the planning department and I said, hey, I did this interview. Did you notice? You guys need to do the interview. Go tell everybody about the interview. And oh, yeah, well, we'll look into it. And what I heard later was that when they did reach out to do the interview process had been closed. So I don't know how many people did the interview or not. I'm hoping that they had a handful at least. But in my mind, it was like, whoa, I'm the only voice out there. I've got to use this voice. So I wasn't sleeping. And so I reached out to some of our leaders, our county leaders, and I approached them and told them of my experience and asked for their voices. And I was dismissed. I was not taken seriously, and nothing came of it. So I stopped sleeping. And I'm a person who sleeps very well.
Is that when a switch flipped in your approach to politics?
Not yet.
Okay.
It hadn't flipped.
I won't rush you. Okay.
And no, it had not flipped yet. So I wrote a letter to the editor of the bulletin. And I told him of my experience that I'd done this because no one else, I wanted to make sure mine was not the only voice. I wanted other voices to speak for Polk County. I didn't want to be the only voice. So I wrote the letter to the editor. I told of my experience, and they published the letter the week before Christmas. And it had all the information about who to contact and the email address, the telephone number. Please go forth and participate. And then in January, time passed and nothing happened. And the Democrats approached me. And by that time, I had had enough. And my thought was, if my voice is going to be the only voice, I'm going to use it. If I have to be the only person out there, then I will do it. This is something that I need to just step up and do. It may be something I've never done before. It may be something I've never even thought about doing before. I have no idea how to do this, but I will do this because we've got to have our voices heard. They must be heard. So I went out and I bought 5, like any good engineer, I bought 5 books on how to run for office. Went to the library, checked out all manner of things on how to run for office. I didn't learn a whole lot.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, but it made me feel better. And I said, okay, I'm it. But if my voice has to be it, it will be out there. Now, what I've learned since then is that I've had 6 people come forward to tell me, as I've been talking about this, they've come forward and they said, hey, you know what? In 1988, the Department of Energy and the state of North Carolina came to Polk County. There was a meeting at the high school where they came because they were looking at putting a nuclear waste disposal facility in Polk County, and they were introducing the topic. The meeting was in the old high school up in Mill Springs, and it has an auditorium that seats 800 or 850, a lot of people, and they packed it. And standing room only, and the people ran them out of town. That was in 1988. Now, what's changed between 1988 and right now? Well, what's changed is where we put our waste. In the early 80s, North Carolina shipped all of their nuclear waste to, we have 3 sites with 5 reactors. And they shipped all of that waste they shipped most of it to Barnwell and South Carolina. And they were part of, over in the early 80s, they were part of the Southeast Atlantic Compact that with several states, 7 states, I believe, shipped their waste to Barnwell. And the agreement was that Barnwell would be the host site for all the nuclear waste for 20 years or until they had collected 32 million cubic feet of, I think it was cubic feet of waste, whichever came first. Well, it became obvious very quickly that, and North Carolina was the second state up, it became obvious that Barnwell was going to fill fast, according to what the plan was at that time.
And just so we are talking about high-level nuclear waste from reactors,
Yes.
not low-level medical waste. And that kind of thing.
What they call it is they call it low-level waste from reactors. It's
Okay.
LLRW, low-level reactor waste.
Okay.
Yeah. And so North Carolina withdrew from the compact. And then Barnwell allowed us to continue to put our waste there until later in the 80s. Then they closed, to everybody except for states, because some other states were putting stuff there, except for states in this compact. And then they said, we will not take anything from North Carolina, period. So since then, we have been storing, since the 80s, the late 80s, mid to late 80s, we have been storing all of our waste from our power plants on site.
Well, this is something a lot of countries are doing, because there's very few countries that have figured out where to put their waste.
Absolutely.
We almost had one in the United States. Nevada was going to take it, but Nevada decided they didn't want it.
Right.
And so it's like back to the drawing boards. Where are we going to put it?
Yes, it is an issue.
I think Finland has figured it out. I think France is close to figuring it out. Canada is also very close. And one of the places they're probably going to put it they've got it down to 2 candidates. One of them is about a half-hour drive from where I grew up. So in the Canadian Shield, which is probably not a bad idea from a purely geological point of view. But anyway, the point is, it is a tricky thing, because nobody really wants to be host to millions of cubic feet of nuclear waste. It's going to be problematic for thousands of years, right?
Absolutely. And it belongs someplace very dry. The salt mines would be great.
Yes.
The shield would be great. But we have a very high water table. We have very porous, permeable soils. This is not a really great place to put a nuclear waste facility. And we have lots of land. Strategically, we're located. Logistically, we're perfect, because we're at the intersection of 7426. We're 40 miles from I-40 and 20 from I-85. So this would be a great location in terms of the feds, but this is a terrible location for us because of our high water table and because of the potential damage that it could cause.
Okay, so the last time serious interest was demonstrated by the federal government was 37 years ago.
Yes.
I guess my question is, why are you worried if it's been 37 years and all we've had is a survey that was of 80 different counties around the country looking at general attitudes? I mean, it seems to me that survey was about just trying to figure out if Americans have shifted their approach, their feelings about nuclear waste.
Well, I think an alternate way of looking at it is that North Carolina has a problem. We're holding it on site. We need some place to put it. We've ignored the issue of where do we put this stuff for a long time. And probably, the Department of Energy has been employed. I mean, this company has been employed. The Department of Energy is interested in what do we do with it. And eventually we're going to have to address it. I just want to make sure it does not come to Polk. It's not, the issue hasn't gone away. It's not going to go away until we have a national policy, until we know where nationally to put this stuff. It doesn't belong any place on the east and the southeast. Our soils are too pervious and we've got too much water. It belongs in the dry west, but that's not going to happen because those people don't want it either. But right now, I just don't want it to come to Polk County. It's an issue that's bigger than we are. It's bigger than I am, but I do not want it in Polk County. I do not want to take the risk to our water table.
Okay, I'm not going out on a limb by saying that almost everybody listening to this will agree with you. Right.
Well, that would be I would be very happy if that were true.
Yeah, I mean, this just, I would be extraordinarily surprised if any plan to put nuclear waste in Polk County got very far beyond the sketches in the back of an envelope stage.
I hope that's correct. I hope that's true. But I also hope that there are other voices that will join mine to say to the fellows in Raleigh, not here. I mean, this is, NIMBYs have a bad rap, but this is one time where I want to be the NIMBY. I don't want it here. And I think that we need to be unified. I think we need to speak with a common voice and say, not here. And I think that if no one else is going to talk out about it, I will. I mean, I have some other issues too, but that's the turning point where I decided that, okay, I can step out of this nice little retirement bubble I've created for myself and I can do something else.
And then you came across some Democrats who said, hey, we need somebody to run.
Yes.
So it was kind of fortuitous.
Yes, there we go.
All right. So that explains why you're running.
And I think I can make a difference.
Okay, well, that's my next question is, everybody's asked this question. What do you bring to the table? Why are you qualified? Why do you think you should replace, one of the incumbents?
I think that I'm professionally qualified. I've had a very long and successful career making large decisions and large infrastructure projects. Never had a project that went over budget. All my projects came in on schedule. I make very logical, detailed decisions. People are forever telling me, oh, too much detail. Oh, you don't need to have all that. Get out of the detail. It's just politics. You don't need that. But as an engineer, the devil's in the details, but so again is the salvation. So I think that my background is well suited. You don't see engineers in politics. We don't do that. But an engineer would be great in politics just because of how we use our logic and how we look at the future and how we assess what is the bang for the buck and where is economy of scale and how many stakeholders can we satisfy with every decision and who are the stakeholders? And
well, certainly as someone who has a background in science communication, I'm constantly being reminded that there are hardly any scientists in Congress or in state legislatures. And we could probably use a few with a scientific or an engineering approach to solving some of the problems, because a lot of our problems are scientific in nature, or they are mechanical in nature, or they are physical in nature. We have to figure out a lot of things. I'm asking, for instance, congressional candidates, how are they going to help Western North Carolinians play a role in the transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a clean, renewable economy? Because that's going to require sacrifices and compromises. They're going to have to maybe see some wind turbines on some mountain ridges, probably going to have to see some power lines running through their pristine forests, because if you can't build a solar array here, you're going to have to import the power from where you can put a solar array. So I appreciate that point of view that you say you bring. But we're talking about a political arena here. So let's move on to the third of the questions I want to explore, and that is, it seems to me that Polk County has had a few things done to it by state legislature recently. The splitting of our county into 2 congressional districts, partisanship added to the school board. The terms on the county commissioners have been eliminated for the 2 years. Now everyone has to sit for 4. And we lost our off-year elections for municipal elections, try-ons. 2 seats in the school board is now going to be 1 with an at-large. So it's a rather lengthy list, and none of them were conducted after consultation with anyone in Polk County.
Right. None of them were conducted with consultation with anyone in Polk County. So where is our government and where do we have transparency? We don't. We don't have transparency in our government. Our commissioners, the city commissioners, participated in all of those decisions. They knew what was going on. They participated with the guys in Raleigh. They knew about this stuff before it came here, and they allowed it to come. They should have, once they heard that this was an option, they should have come and put it out for public discourse. And then they should have gathered opinions from the community before they decided how they were going to proceed. I mean, they just rubber stamped it, or they just said they didn't use their voice. They just rolled right over. They let the state people dictate how it was going to be in our county. And that's not the way it should be. We send people to the state with our votes. We should have those people behave in our best interest. They should be making decisions in our best interest. And if they think that they have a different point of view, they should at least come and create discourse with us so that we can participate in the discussion. And that did not happen for any of those things.
Well, to be fair, a couple of times the county commission did oppose publicly after public meetings, things like the partisanships on school board and Highway 9 widening. They wrote letters expressing their unhappiness with the situation, but it happened anyway. So my question is, if the state legislature is going to run roughshod over us, regardless of what the county commissioners say, what are our alternatives?
I think we could make it harder on the people of Raleigh. And I disagree with you. I think that our county commissioners knew about Highway 9 before that happened. They knew about it way in advance. They were asleep at the wheel. They knew about the school board decisions way in advance. They sent those letters because they had to appease the voters, because there was so much backlash from the community that they had to be seen as doing something.
So doing something isn't sufficient for you. They have to have had some actions earlier in the game.
Yes, absolutely. They need to participate.
Well, again, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that philosophy.
Would you like me to say something disagreeable?
Well, I just like I think everyone has to accept some compromises when things get difficult. I think that candidates for political office should dare to say a few things that might ruffle some feathers, not just among their political opponents.
They should be ruffling feathers. Yes, absolutely. Yes. If you're a political candidate, you ought to ruffle some feathers. If you're sitting on the Board of Commissioners, you ought to ruffle feathers. When you sit there, you're speaking in the best interest of the county. You need to be going out and finding opinions. You need to be asking people for alternate points of view. And you're not going to agree with all of them. So the ones that you don't agree with, those people might get miffed. But if you do it all in the best interest, eventually it will sort itself out.
Now, I haven't talked to all the Republican candidates yet, but those Republicans that I have talked to would say, well, James, we're forced to accept some things from Raleigh that we didn't like, but we've gotten some things from them in return, like money for the Lake Hadger Dam rebuilding. So they say, you can't just stand up and make a fuss every time something happens you don't like. You have to play ball. You have to compromise. You have to choose your battles.
I agree with you. And we can't piss off the guys in Raleigh, because if little Polk County pisses off somebody in Raleigh, they can make it harder on us, especially if they don't live here when they're not in Raleigh.
So what would your approach be to the selection of the battles you want to fight?
Well, first of all, I pick all my battles very carefully. And I would pick battles that made a difference to the greatest number of people in the county. And then I would spend time with the people in Raleigh to understand what their position was and try to get them to understand what our position was. And then start looking for some common ground for negotiation. And yet, when I did that, I would be telling my constituency, I'd tell everybody what I was doing so that it was transparent, so people knew what I was doing. So it wasn't all of a sudden, here's where we are and here's what we're going to do. And that takes a lot of effort, because that just requires a lot more communication. And you make yourself much more vulnerable when you do that. But I think that that's what's needed. If you're going to have transparent government, that's how I think to have transparent government.
A lot of people are making this argument. We have a need for more transparency. We need to have more debate during public meetings of the Board of Commissioners rather than have de facto decisions that have already been made.
Absolutely.
But, you aren't paid a lot to be the commissioner. It's not a full-time job. Holding more public meetings, consulting more of the public, it takes work. It takes time.
I'm not sure holding more public meetings is necessary. I think there are lots of ways to communicate. It's not all public meetings. But if you look at the commissioners' meetings that we've had in the last 6 months, and this year I've been to all the commissioners' meetings except for 2 when I had COVID, and I think I had a kid in town for the weekend. And
You're excused.
Thank you. But of those, the last 6 months, the meetings have had no discussion and no questions. And so it's just, well, here's the proposal. No discussion, no questions, let's vote. And one of the ways to engage the folks is there are almost always people sitting there in the audience, is for the commissioners to ask questions so that, maybe they're asking questions they think they know the answers to, but none of the populace who's sitting in the audience knows what the answers are. But that way they can open it up the discourse so that, and often there's a reporter there from the bulletin, if they're covering the meeting, that they could also have that information to go ahead and post so that we can open it up. It wouldn't take very much more time. The last 3 meetings have lasted less than 3 meetings ago, the meeting lasted 17 minutes. 2 meetings ago, the meeting lasted 27 minutes. This week, I think the meeting was 37 minutes.
Even for summertime meetings, that's pretty quick.
Yes, it is pretty quick. I mean, and they're approving budget transfers, and there's no discussion, and there are no questions. So the decisions are being made someplace else. And, I get that, but we need to let the people know what the basis of those decisions are.
To wrap up then, you've told us why you're running, the issue that propelled you into the political arena, and you've given us a general idea of what you would like to, what the kind of commissioner you'd like to be. What other issues do you think need addressed?
I think that we need to make sure that we have local control of our development issues. We have developers coming in all around the county interested in our land. We've got lots of land. It's a beautiful place to live. And the developers want to put in housing. And we know that housing is an issue. It's a national problem. It's a county problem. We need workforce housing, which is places that our professional people, like our nurses and our teachers and our EMS and our cops, that those people can have access to and can afford to live in. So some of them are first-time home buyers. Some of them are coming back home from someplace else, but they're not in a position to buy big, expensive houses. And so we do need housing, but I think that the decisions about where that housing is and how it comes to our county is something that should be controlled locally. I'm not advocating zoning. I mean, we've got great zoning. We have half the county zoned, half of it's not. Don't tell somebody what they can or cannot do with their land. And we've got great ordinances. I think they're inclusive. I know that the planning board is looking at the ordinances right now. We want to make sure that our kids can come back and live here. But I think that those decisions have to be made locally. Otherwise, we don't want to look like Boiling Springs. We don't want to look like Spartanburg County.
Poor Boiling Springs. Even I have made jokes about Boiling Springs.
I know, it's so sad, isn't it?
I was at a Polk County Planning Board meeting a couple months ago, and I heard something that made me think, because I'm chair of the Saluda Planning Board. The assumption seemed to be among everyone in the room, all of you on the board and the audience, was that, well, we need affordable and workforce housing, but that's really going to be up to Saluda, Tryon, and Columbus. We don't want that stuff to happen in the county.
That's currently what everybody's saying, is that the purpose, put the population in the townships, where the townships have the infrastructure to handle that density. And that way we protect the county, and we keep the county rural. That's fraught with contradictions. And right now, Columbus is struggling with 2 new developments, one behind the CVS, the old Fagan property, and developers coming in to put in roughly 50 houses. Mm. And then Enchanted Builders out of Spartanburg, who do not have a very good local reputation, coming in to put in a roughly 250 unit development on 108 between the old Milliken Hatch plant and the New Jasmine Apartments, in that hole.
And where the YMCA is going.
Where the YMCA, yes. And so both of those, those are both in the town. And that's a lot. That's just a lot of traffic. That's a lot of people. Both of those developments are going to need major traffic studies. The one on Jasmine, that's in a hole. Runoff is an issue. There needs to be environmental impact. There needs to be stormwater runoff.
This is where your engineering background is coming in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look at that property. I had a discussion with one of the other candidates for county commissioner who's a real estate agent who said, oh, there's nothing wrong. We can fix this. And yes, anything can be fixed with enough money and enough time, but is it the right thing? I mean, is that the right place to put it? Or if you're going to put it there, how can you make it right? And how can you make it so that in 10 years, you're not ashamed of what the subdivision looks like?
So are you saying that maybe we shouldn't force all of the higher density housing into the cities, that maybe Polk County, a little pieces of it here and there could have some development?
I think that we're doing a great job in Polk County with some development. We have a Housing Assistance Corporation, has got the 20 houses going in off of 108. They just put in 4 houses off of Highway 9 South. And those are lovely houses, and they're very well-built houses.
Yeah.
They're not slap dab houses.
I think if people could see those houses, they would no longer shrink at the word affordable housing, because those houses are perfectly fine.
Right, and they're on large lots. I mean, they're out in the county, so we need a couple acres here or there. I think it's a 5-acre lot, or if it's a subdivision, I mean, it was smaller than 5 acres. I'm staying away from the details here on purpose. And yeah, I mean, we have that kind of housing and we can continue with that. That's great. And it's good quality housing. It's well sited. They're going to be nice when they finish. People have to put in sweat equity. I think they build 4 houses at a time and everybody has to pitch in on all 4 houses. So it's like 4 houses get done at one time. And not only that, when those 4 families are finished, they have made some kind of a bond. They know each other. So they're already a community of 4. And so then when the next 4 houses go in, it's just their little community gets a little bit larger. And that's great. The problem with the Columbus subdivisions is that those developers are taking and putting their structures on the minimum amount of land that they possibly can get by with. And if they would just make their lots a little bit larger, and they would provide a little bit more green space, and they'd put a little bit more thought into their traffic patterns, I think that the community would be a lot gentler in their approach to, oh, we're getting new housing.
Well, asking a developer to make less money is
very difficult. Yes.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about?
Well, let me just say that the developer coming in for behind a CVS is located out of Massachusetts. And they do work. They have 4 projects in Western North Carolina because they like it here so much and they know we need housing and they want to come and help us.
Which isn't a bad thing.
No, it's not, but it's a little twisted.
All right. Well, I think this interview has accomplished what it set out to do. I think people have got a good idea of where you're coming from and what kind of commissioner you'd be. So thanks very much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me, James.
Hopefully, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s lawyers haven't thrown a monkey wrench into our state's election system, and the absentee ballots are available from our county elections office. But I also hope only those who absolutely can't wait until October to cast a ballot take advantage of absentee voting, because there are several more candidate interviews in the folklore pipeline that might help sort out who deserves support. I'll keep releasing them every few days until I run out of them. If you've got any comments, please send them to jamesh@folklore.com. Thanks for listening.